There is a moment every farmer knows. It comes at the kitchen table, usually late at night when the rest of the house is quiet. It's when you lay out the numbers, what you spent to plant, what you got for the harvest, what the bank is owed, and the math refuses to work, no matter how many times you run it, no matter how you arrange the columns. That moment used to visit Missouri farms once in a generation, a drought year, a flood year, a crash that came and went. Now it's visiting every single year. Missouri is one of the greatest agricultural states in the entire country. Over 95,000 farms, nearly 28 million acres of farmland. Agriculture touches every corner of this state's economy, $93 billion in total economic impact. When the land is healthy and the markets are fair, Missouri feeds the world and funds the towns and fills the schools and holds the whole rural fabric of this state together. But something has gone terribly wrong, and the people sitting at those kitchen tables across Missouri's countryside know it, even if the headlines don't always say it plainly. Missouri's agricultural economy is collapsing, and the state's own economic experts are now warning that the worst may still be ahead. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to the window when everything was good. From 2021 to 2023, grain prices ran hot. Corn, soybeans, wheat, all of them stayed above the cost of production. Farmers paid down debt. Working capital built up. For a few years, the math at the kitchen table actually worked. That window is gone. The average total cost of producing an acre of corn peaked at a record $928 in 2022. It eased slightly, but not enough. In 2024, while the cost of production sat at $888 per acre, the average value of what that corn actually sold for had slipped to just $757. That's a loss of $131 for every single acre planted. And USDA projections show the cost of growing an acre of corn climbing back toward $915 in 2026, while prices remain stubbornly, punishingly low. You plant it, you tend it, you harvest it, and at the end of it all, the land takes more from you than it gives back. This is the economic reality of being a Missouri grain farmer right now. Not a bad year, not a rough patch, a structural multi-year collapse of the economics that are supposed to make crop farming viable. And the bankruptcies have started to reflect it. In 2025, Missouri recorded 16 Chapter 12 farm bankruptcies, a 167% increase from the year before. That is not a rounding error. That is not noise in the data. A 167% surge in a single year means farms that had survived tight margins, high debt, and bad seasons are now reaching the end of what resilience can absorb. And farm bankruptcy filings are what economists call a lagging indicator, meaning by the time the filing happens, the financial deterioration has been building for years. The farms going bankrupt today started dying a long time ago. Nationally, 315 Chapter 12 farm bankruptcies were recorded in 2025, a 46% jump from 2024, the second consecutive increase. The Midwest as a region saw a 70% surge. Missouri sits in the middle of that crisis, and the projection for total farm debt across the entire country in 2026 is a record $624.7 billion. Interest costs alone are expected to hit a record $33 billion. Nearly 40% more new farm operating loans were opened in the final quarter of 2025 compared to the year before, and the average operating loan was 30% larger, with repayment timelines 3 months longer than 2024. That is not a picture of an industry recovering. That is a picture of an industry borrowing its way toward a cliff. Now, let's talk about what accelerated this, because the math was already bad, and then a force arrived that made it catastrophic: China. Missouri grows soybeans, millions of acres of them, and soybeans, more than almost any other crop, live or die based on what China buys. For years, China was the engine that drove global soybean demand, the reason prices held up, the reason planting season felt worth the risk. Then the trade war ignited. Tariffs flew. China didn't just push back, it changed its buying patterns entirely, pivoting toward Brazil and Argentina. By late 2025, Chinese soybean purchases from the United States had dropped by more than 60% compared to the same period in 2024. 60% gone. The American Soybean Association sent a letter to the administration in Washington, warning that soybean farmers were standing at what they called a trade and financial precipice. That is not the language of an industry making a polite request. That is the language of an industry in distress. And Missouri soybean farmers felt it in their prices, in their margins, and in that late-night moment at the kitchen table when the numbers stopped working. The governor of Missouri held the 51st Missouri Governors Conference on Agriculture in November 2025, as hundreds in the agricultural sector gathered to debate the future of farming amid what everyone in the room recognized as a genuine economic crisis. The conversation centered on the same collision: high input costs slamming into low market prices, all while trade uncertainty stripped away the export markets that had underpinned grain prices for a generation. The governor acknowledged the challenge. He said there were things that could be done. He spoke of getting government out of the way of family farmers. He touted a new soybean deal with China as a potential turning point. The room was polite. The farmers were listening. But the seed dealer in Montgomery County didn't raise his soybean price because of a conference in Columbia. The input costs didn't fall because of an executive order. The debt didn't disappear because of optimism. And the economists working closest to the numbers were issuing warnings that cut through the room. Missouri's net farm income, which had been propped up in 2025 by $1.3 billion in emergency government payments from the American Relief Act, is projected to fall by 23% in 2026. 23%. The moment those emergency payments return to historical average levels, the cushion disappears, and what's underneath it is not a recovering market. It is a multi-year decline in crop receipts, continued high production costs, and roughly 250,000 fewer acres expected to be planted this season because farmers simply cannot afford the risk. Fewer planted acres means less revenue for the state, less volume for grain elevators, less business for equipment dealers, less work for the mechanics on the county road, less tax revenue for the school district, less everything for the towns that have always lived downstream of what the farms produce. This is the mechanism that rural economists describe over and over, and that never quite makes the news as it should. A farm doesn't just feed people, it anchors an entire local economy. When one fails, 5 businesses feel it. When 10 fail in a county, the county starts to hollow out. When the hollowing spreads across dozens of counties in a state the size of Missouri, you are no longer watching a farm crisis. You are watching the slow economic death of rural America. There is one more layer to this story that deserves to be said plainly. The average age of a Missouri farmer is nearly 60 years old. 6 decades of life, decades of seasons planted and harvested, decades of debt carried and paid, decades of betting on the land year after year, because that is what farming asks of you. These are not inexperienced operators making rookie mistakes. These are some of the most capable, most knowledgeable agricultural producers on earth, and they are being buried by forces that have nothing to do with how well they farm. Commodity prices set by global markets they cannot control, trade policies decided in rooms they are not in, input costs driven by supply chains that stretch to the other side of the world, interest rates set by a Federal Reserve that does not know their names. And yet, when the conference ends and the cameras leave and the emergency payments run out, It is those farmers sitting at those kitchen tables running the same numbers one more time, hoping this time they work. If this story matters to you, hit subscribe and make sure you don't miss what comes next. Share this with someone who has never thought about where their food comes from, and leave a comment. Do you believe Missouri's farms are getting the help they actually need? I'll see you in the next one.